So she bought me some forks. And then like 2 days before the contest or the weekend I was going to go down for this contest, I broke the brand new pair of forks. And I went to my mom and I'm like, Mom, is there any way I can get some money to buy some forks? And she's like, David, I just bought you forks. What do you mean? I go, I know, I was right. I was at this jump and I broke these forks, the new ones, and I want to go to this contest. And so she said, the only way we can do this is we got to have a family meeting because right now, so she's a single mother, kind of living paycheck to paycheck. And she's like, okay, we're going to sit down with your brothers and we're going to have a meeting. And the meeting went like this. She said, okay, David wants $40 for these forks. If I buy these forks for David, we have to eat whatever's in the cupboards for the next, week or whatever until payday because I cannot go grocery shopping. I mean, this is what it came down to. And both my brothers said, buy the forks. And they, supported it 100%.
BMX Breakthrough is bridging the gap from old school to new school, from tracks to manufacturers, from new riders to their local tracks, and it doesn't stop at racing, but the mission is to connect people with bikes. Join me, Jay Oaks, as I interview key people in the sport and in the industry that are involved in their local circles, in their communities, at their local tracks, and aiming to make a difference on a local level. You'll hear stories, marketing tips, failures, successes, and a way to make a difference in your local BMX community. Let's dive in as we kick off this next episode. Dave, it's exciting to have a conversation with you and to get to talk about what it is that you do, because I'm going to be completely honest, your skill set is pretty far outside of my scope of influence. So and outside of my scope of understanding to some extent, which is why when you and I had a conversation at Dirty Fest, I was so excited to get you on the podcast. And as I kept diving into learning more and more about you and hearing about you in the past. But Dave, will you introduce yourself? Tell us a bit about who you are and what kind of BMX riding you do.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me, Jay. It's been exciting to think about sharing it with new audience and new people, especially that's related to BMX. So I'm a flatland rider. So back in the day, we used to just call it freestyle. We did a little bit of everything, but as the sports evolved, there's been the disciplines that have kind of separated. So I consider myself a flatland. I don't really do much park riding or street riding. I just specialize on doing flat ground tricks. And that's everything from spinning and handstands. And I come from the 80 generation, so I'm kind of considered the old school rider. And I'm sticking to that. Like I do a little bit of new school stuff, but I kind of like the old school, and that's kind of that's my lane that I stay in, so to speak. So I've been doing it for many years. I like it a lot. I'm teaching more. I'm able to travel quite a bit. I've got some sponsors that have been supporting me over the last few years to get me around, and that's been grateful. I'm super grateful for that, just to be able to share it. And I went to Dirty Fest, and that was a great place to kind of cross into other BMX families and BMX genres.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's amazing because I didn't grow up in an area that had any sort of flatland scene. I don't remember seeing any flatland riders. I remember looking through magazines. And so I know your name from going through some of my dad's old BMX action magazines and or freestyling and looking through a couple of those and stuff. But I don't think I ever knew anybody that would do flatland. And so seeing you and being able to be around you and the amount of skill, the amount of balance that your craft takes is unbelievable to me.
Yeah, I feel like flatland is definitely one of those. It's interesting niche in BMX. Like I said earlier, we used to just ride everything. Like you just had a bike and you would just ride a little bit of street, a little bit of dirt, maybe if there's some ramps around. And flatland was kind of, the in between. So I lived in San Diego. I used to go to the beach, and that's when we would just get like a group of riders together. And again, this is the 80s. So there's like breakdancing, There's skateboarding, like freestyle skateboarding. So that, you know, not necessarily just street riding, but freestyle skateboarding and roller skating, like, you know, dancing to roller skates, not even roller blades, and then BMX flatland. And I just kind of felt like that was my place, and I just excelled in it. And I went there pretty much every day I could, you know, on the weekends and during the summer. And in San Diego, the weather's really good, so you can pretty much go nearly year round. And where did you say you grew up? Because you said you didn't have much flatland.
Up in Northwest Washington.
Northwest
So
Washington, yeah. Yeah,
north of
so when we
Seattle.
traveled and did shows, yeah, we did shows in various different places. So Seattle was one of the places. I remember we did a show in Federal Way, and it was like
Yeah.
in '86, and only a few people showed up. It was so interesting because sometimes, depending on the bike shop, how much they promoted it. So we had this really small audience. And I remember just talking to Ron and Brian recently about that because we were just doing a show up in Seattle a couple weeks ago. And we were talking about that show, like some of the best writing, even though there was only like 6 or 7 people watching it. It was like some of the best writing. And we met some of those people in Seattle that had been at that show, which was really cool. So I feel like Flatland
Wow.
has always been a part of BMX on some levels. Even, you know, racers that, you know, learn how to, I don't know, do an Indo or do, you know, some, you know, 180. It's still, you know, Flatland's kind of like the real fundamental basic tricks that you learn when you're on a bike.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, because back to the balance, the you have to have balance. And so, I mean, I have pretty good balance, so I can track stand fairly well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think my track stand improves or declines a little bit based on what bike I'm on, but I can track stand okay, and I can do a bunny hop 180, and I can fakie out of it and things like that. So there are things that I've pulled from that flatland world without actually having thought about it until you're saying that. But it is interesting because of there are so many BMX fundamentals that really do come from your specific discipline.
Yeah, for sure. And I think too, like part of the things that I really focus on these days is making that fundamental. We talked earlier, you know, before we started that like, fundamentals kind of in my key little marketing approach because I want to encourage a rider, whether it's a BMX rider or someone that's used to ride freestyle and is coming back. You know, a lot of times in their 40s and 50s, they kind of like hit a bike again and like kind of want to start riding. And Flatland now is so intimidating. So I don't know if you've seen much of current Flatland riding, but it is just off the charts. You know, just brakeless, you know, incredible spinning and transfers that are just you can't really imagine how you start. How do you get it to that point? And it takes a lot of discipline and a lot of time in. So I'm just trying to like scale it back a bit and go, okay, well let's start with an Indo. Let's start with, you know, how do you do a 180 and how do you do a tail whip? Like, you know, some real fundamental tricks that hopefully you can learn in a relatively short amount of time to then be inspired to like maybe expand on that. I mean, when I teach a class, usually I do like 10 to 12 riders and I have them for a week. And then after the week is the last day, we put a show together and we perform for their friends and family. And so in the beginning, I say, we're going to do a show. You have 3 routines and do 3 tricks. So you have to learn 9 tricks. And often these kids, they're mostly kids, they're like, wow, 9 tricks, that's a lot. And I said, well, we can start with just standing on the seat, you know, or just standing up on the frame, you know, just super fundamental, and then try to build upon that. And it really worked this last time where I gave them a list of tricks. I gave them 43 tricks to pick from, everything from, you know, a slider to even a 180 is not easy to learn in a week. You know, if you haven't learned a bunny hop yet. So a 180 would maybe be like the more advanced riders that have been riding for a bit, but just some really fundamentals that are kind of fun and easy and entertaining. And it's amazing how well that gets them kind of into, all right, I can do this. And I say, if you see something, don't be intimidated. Let's just break it down. Like, how do we start? You know, how do we get into that, you know, tail whip? What is the first step? And yeah, it's been good. It's been a lot of fun.
That's great. Such a solid introduction to riding. And one thing that I was thinking as you were speaking was that the dynamic of flatland is you don't need anything other than a bike. And that's one thing that's really cool is that you don't have to have a track. You don't have to have a massive open space. You really just need, I mean, a driveway, but I mean, I guess essentially you could start learning things in your yard.
Yeah. I mean, sidewalks. I mean, a lot of tricks. Like I tell these students of mine that I basically did, going back to when I would go to the beach, I had like 5 tricks that I did probably for a good couple of years. I learned to do a frame stand up on the frame and let go of my hands. I learned to hop onto the handlebars. I learned a 360, just, jump up, bunny hop 360. I learned frame stand, 180 rollbacks, and maybe some balance. But a lot of them were rolling. It was just like up and down the sidewalk, up and down the boardwalk at the beach. So I feel like, yeah, flatland that's one of the great things is that you can just do it on the way to, the skate park if you're going to the skate park, or to the track. You can just play around with it. And then I do agree though that it's simple to get into, but I also believe strongly in like having the right bike, because a lot of times I'll get riders that show up with what I call department store bike, and it's like heavy, the brakes don't work well. They might have pegs and brakes on it, and I recommend starting with that and then taking your brakes off if you evolve to that part of flatland where you're just doing all brakeless stuff. But I think it's good, in my opinion, and some people have different opinion about that, but I just feel like I can show you a lot with brakes, and then if you evolve past that, great. But I've been really diligent on getting the right bikes for the student to try, because it makes such a difference. When I see someone roll up on we used to always give Huffy a bad name, like a Huffy, but it's now just like a department store bike. It might even have a brand name on it. It might even say Mongoose, but it's just not a quality bike. And it's really heavy. And like I said, brakes don't work well. So I make sure that the bikes are super dialed, and it's night and day difference. And I also let them take the bikes home if they want to. And I say 3 rules. I say, first off, don't ever lend it out, and don't ever leave it anywhere, because bikes will get stolen. And then the final rule, which is the most important, is you have to ride it. If you're going to take it home, you have to ride it. And so when I started doing that, what I noticed is the riders that took the bikes because they spent more time on it, and going back to like the balance, balance just comes from spending a lot of time on your bike. It doesn't necessarily have to, be that you have to specifically work on balancing on a track stand, but just riding your bike and getting familiar with it. And sure enough, the riders that took it, basically they did so much better. And their parents would say, I can't get them off it. They're out there riding. It's dinner time, trying to get them in, and which is great news for me, because that's what I want to see, is just that enthusiasm. And it's been really interesting to watch that.
That's
To
neat.
see the bike, and then the time that they spend on it.
I feel like there are very few things that are more exciting than hearing about kids that don't want to get off of their bikes.
Right.
And oh man, as a dad, like there's part of me that still gets emotional even thinking about it right now, is like the dynamic of my kids having fallen in love with their bikes, and the amount of time that they want to spend on their bikes is far exceeding of anything that I would have expected. And
Mm-hmm.
it's I absolutely love it. It's the same way that I was when I was a kid, but you can be hopeful for your kids to love their bike. But the way that my kids have fallen in love with their bike, and the way that you're describing this of your kids that come to your camps, and they learn to ride their bike, and they learn to love their bike, that's a huge win.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I have a little saying. I go, for just like introducing freestyle to the any rider, like I said, a racer, or freestyler, or someone that just wants to learn tricks. And it goes from, take it from curiosity to confidence. And I feel like giving them just a few little, it's not like I have to teach them a whole lot. You just have to show by example, get them around other riders. And that's how we did it. I'm sure that's how a lot of the racing is. You work off your friends, and you learn how to, coach each other, so to speak. Because I don't want to be like, okay, I'm this person that I have to like direct you exactly how to take this on or learn. I'll give you some tips. And like I said, I gave this list, and the list was really helpful because I could just see their heads kind of going, wait, I can't think of 9 tricks. So I each gave them a list, and then I performed the trick. I go, okay, read off the first 5, and I did those 5 tricks. And then I said, if you like it, put a little check mark, and then those are the tricks. So then I said, okay, we're working on surfers over here. Whoever wants to do surfers, and they would all come over and we do it collectively as a group, because I'm trying to encourage that, I don't have to be there. I don't have to be this person there orchestrating it. Hopefully they'll just get together, and it's happening. I have some kids that are in the same neighborhood in the cul-de-sac. I've sold 3 bikes, and they're all to girls, which is great because we need more girls. If we're ever going to get in the Olympics, we need to have a more balance of male and female, right, riders. We don't have many young women riding right now. So I just feel very proud to say I sold 3 flatland bikes to girls. They're like 12, 13 years old, and they're like really in it. And their whole little neighborhood, they're riding, constantly. And of course, those are the girls that are excelling the most because they're spending the time. So yeah, I just feel like that's just the key, just to create that environment and give them the tools, but not be like only coming from my input. I just want to encourage it.
Yeah. Well, there's the girl that's been at Dirty Fest, and her dad is Todd. I can't think of her name right
Yeah.
now.
I know who. I saw her riding. I have a few pictures of her. I can't think of her name either, but she did the show with us, right?
She did. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that little girl is so amazing. And to see when she gets up and she puts her foot on her handlebar, and and she's I think at the time she was still holding on to the grips, but she's working. You can see her trying to get that confidence to let go and trying to master that balance. But regardless of where she's at, the smile that comes across her face when she gets back onto her pedals is just absolutely amazing.
Yeah. That's I mean, that's what I live for. It's just that, seeing that kind of true inspiration that they're just, living. And it's what I did when I was a kid, and I am still doing it for that thrill, for that, excitement.
Yeah.
Some people would always say, what are you, a show off? And I'm like, yeah, I actually am a show off, and I don't have a problem with that. Like trying to, talk down to me. I sent you that video, that clip that was at the park.
Yeah.
And it was on YouTube. It did really well. It got a lot of views. And it's just reading the comments were so interesting because, and I had a beard at the time. So I had a little gray goatee, and I'm riding in the park, and there's a bunch of teenagers around. And the criticism was just hilarious. They're like, oh, this old man, he should be sitting on the porch watching birds, not, riding a 20-inch BMX bike. And it just makes me laugh because it's like, you have no idea. Like, this has been feeding my soul for over 40 years. And it doesn't change. Like, if I'm out there riding, I still feel 16. I mean, maybe not exactly. Some parts of my body, don't work quite as well, but in my heart and my soul, I'm like, enjoying that same thrill of performing or learning a new trick. Or mostly, it's not even learning a new trick. It's trying to remember to bring back old tricks at this stage, like tricks that I've lost that I'm trying to bring back, for sure.
That is really cool. I love that dynamic, and it is interesting. The people that are the loudest in those situations usually are the people that aren't riding. Anybody that rides, well, I mean, the reality is that anybody that's out riding BMX isn't going to think anything of you being out on your bike. And
yeah, I mean, I come from a place where I'm empathetic, because I feel like if that's the, I mean, trying to be, nice about it, but if their life is where they go on the internet and they see somebody doing something that they love, which obviously I'm doing, and their feedback is to criticize and put down, I have to feel somewhat sorry for that individual. Like, if that's, their life that they're choosing, as opposed to, I've always gone to this saying, what goes around comes around, right? And so when I go to a place in riding, I never try to feel like I'm, let me, step in and take over. I just like read the room and get a feel, and hopefully be able to be welcomed to a scene like a flatland scene or even a bike scene. And just always, it's always what my take has been on it and my approach. So I feel empathetic for people like that. I try not to comment because I don't really know what to say. Like,
Yeah, it is fascinating the number of criticisms that you get from people that A, don't ride, B, if they do ride, it's very likely that they can't do what you do, and C, I mean it, yeah, that is the highlight of their lives in most of that cases, and they're, they just don't have, it seems like sometimes there just isn't that much better for, they don't have something better to do. And
mhm.
but anyway, I mean, I was talking about that recently with somebody though, is that those negative comments, thanks, you're driving the algorithm, you're showing more people
I
my
know.
video.
I was just going to go there, Jay. I was just going to go there. I swear that video did really well because there was a couple different threads of the other thing that they were talking about is because I was doing the upside down and I'm like grinding my seat and spinning my handlebars. And they're saying stuff like, oh, the guy just, grandpa borrowed the kid's bike and then trashed the seat. So there's all these different threads that are going around. And it was that negativity that actually probably boosted the actual views. So,
Yeah,
we'll take it, right?
so thanks, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's, I don't know, it's wild, but I just think it's amazing what you can do. And you sent over that video. I didn't have it. Now I'm gonna go through the comments because I didn't have a chance to go through it when I watched the video. But it's phenomenal. It's, and I think Flatland is one of the things that I think there's a dynamic where you don't know how hard it is. Like you see pictures or videos of
Hmm.
guys that are dirt jumping or they're doing tail whips over spines at the skate park. And there's a level of difficulty that people say, oh, I can't do that. But there's a side of Flatland where I think it's really easy to believe that, oh, well, anybody can do that. Well,
Yeah.
it just takes some time. I could learn how to balance. Like, no, you can't. You can, but you're not going to, and you can't do that super easily. Quick detour to one of our gold level sponsors, Luminex Neon, who has partnered with us to help accomplish the mission here at BMX Breakthrough. We're so grateful for their opportunity. And there's a special place, a near and dear place in my heart for neon, all things neon, whether that's on paper, whether it's shoes, whether it is a sign in a living room or a garage space, it doesn't matter. I love neon, always have, probably always will. And so neon signs create a unique statement piece. So if you're looking for that for your bike shop, for your garage, for your workspace, maybe it's for your living room, Luminex Neon offers exactly what you need. So with unparalleled craftsmanship and endless design possibilities, Luminex Neon is your go-to for brightening up any space. You can follow the link in the description and use our promo code BMX Breakthrough 10 in order to get 10% off of your order and to explore everything that Luminex Neon has to offer.
I feel like a lot of other BMX riders in different disciplines, speak more and more about the respect, especially current day flatland. Like I just went to Cleveland for the Flatland Assassins contest Chris Young puts on called Battleground. This is the second round. And I competed. I competed in the mid school legends class, and did well. I didn't win, but it's okay. I competed against Ruben Castillo and Todd Carter and Brian Huffman, and it was great. Like I was right in the right group. I had been competing pro, but now it's at that point where this feels like my group. Anyhow, I just was amazed by people talking about Flatland that know, kind of to your point, about the time and the difficulty and the practice that it takes. And not to say that doing a big tail whip over a spine doesn't take a lot of practice and a little bit different fear factor. I think Flatland's not as fearful, although you can get hurt, but maybe that risk is not as high. But you still, depending on the trick you do, and I've seen some pretty gnarly slams doing Flatland. As I get older, I'm kind of noticing I'm getting lower and lower to the ground. Like my tricks are not as much decade stuff and like rolling handstands. I just trying to like ease into the safe zone, so to speak. It's my longevity plan, right? And so I hear like one person, Pete Augustine. So I mean, he's like the guy that really created, the more of the rebellious, like he had tattoos and didn't wear jersey, like cut off his sleeves, and he was really into street and like kind of broke through into the street scene. And he talks about Flatland. He's like, yeah, I have so much respect for it because he knows. And I think people that just see it may not really know like what goes through, into it. And for me personally, I've been doing it a long time, but I still feel like I'm basically doing a lot of fundamental basic tricks. And I'll post that in a video and they're like, Nourie, what do you mean this is fundamental? Because I'm doing something that's kind of difficult, but I'm comparing it to, a current no-handed blender where you're pedaling on top of the head tube, spinning around without your hands off. Like that is next level compared to my slider bar spin, or cherry picker or something like that. So I think there's a broad stroke of technique and skill set for sure in flatland.
Yeah. Well, and I think most people can't hop on a pogo stick, let alone get on your
Mm.
bicycle, get the bike to stand up in the air, climb around the handlebars onto the head
Mm-hmm.
tube, and then try to bounce. And then try to get
Yeah.
back onto your pedals. And tell me
Right.
how
Right.
easy that is.
Yeah. 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 Right. Right. That's true.
Because I'm not trying it. I guarantee it. And I can use a pogo stick, but there's no
Mm-hmm.
way that I'm going to master that easily on a bike.
Right.
So
Yeah.
no, it's cool. But actually I want to go back before I forget. I want to go back to the camps that you do because that is, and you kind of mentioned it, but there's so much of your heart there in those, and I don't know if you call them camps, but when you and I talked at Dirty Fest, that was the part of the conversation where I was like, I love what this guy's doing. And so I'd
Mm-hmm.
love for you to speak to what it is that these camps or clinics, whatever it is that you call them, what they look like, and how they're, how they go and how long they run and all that.
Yeah. I mean, I'm really grateful because it's kind of evolved over the years. So when I moved up here, I'm in Oregon. I'm in Ashland, Oregon, so Southern Oregon. I moved up from San Diego, and at the time, I started to do bike shows and teach at the Y. So I've always had this desire to teach because it goes back to when I traveled around on tour back in the 80s with Ron and Brian on the Haro team. We went to shops, so we would do the show, and then afterwards we'd like to ride with the locals and like learn stuff and feed off each other. Same kind of little jam session. And that always was, I mean, doing a show and performing was always wonderful and great, but really just meeting the locals, and we'd go out on street rides and we'd go to their half bikes, we'd have barbecues. That was like always, the best part of the tours for us. So I think that that's just been instilled in me from my early days of BMXing from the beach, Mission Beach, same kind of thing. All the buddies, it was Eddie Roman, Pete Augustine, Rick Allison would show up, Jason Parks, Dave Smith, not Dave Smith. I can't think of his name. I can't think of it. But all these riders that were just like the local scene, and we would always be feeding off of each other, right? Just building off each other. And so when I started teaching these camps, and I do call them camps or clinics, doesn't really, just depends. I just kept perfecting it. The first thing was getting bikes because I really, like I spoke earlier, it's really essential to get them on a bike that actually works. It has a gyro, has decent pegs, and is set up. Even the geometry of flatland bike is going to be a shorter top tube, so it's easier to do a tail whip or a boomerang on it. And that I think was essential. So I got some people to help sponsor. Reclamation has been really helpful in building this fleet of bikes. I have about 20 bikes. And then I started just to focus on performance because I feel like when there's an end goal of putting on a show, I even ask, I go, who wants to do a show, who doesn't? And some hands won't go up. And I go, okay, well, you don't have to, you could announce, or you could, I try to think of other things to do, but 9 times out of 10, I don't think I've ever had anyone not ride in the show. You know, eventually they'll just, again, building their curiosity to confidence. And I say, okay, where are you at? What can you do? Let's see, what can you do? Can you stand on the seat? Okay, there you go. Can you take a hand off while you're on the, you know, and I just encourage that. And then by the third or fourth day, they have enough under their belts to say, okay, you know, you're ready to perform in the show. So that's really been, I think, a key aspect, is that there's an end goal. Sometimes I'll do even a 1-day clinic or camp. So I went down to Mexico a few months back, and there was a big old school show and a freestyle flatland contest. And then we went to the plaza downtown and Aguas Calientes, and it was just a free event. And again, I didn't have all my bikes, so some of the bikes weren't ideal for these kids. They were just riding whatever they could. So I had to work with that, because if everybody has the same bike, they all have pegs. We can all say, okay, let's hop on the front pegs. But if not everybody has pegs, that's difficult, right? So I did this one day, and literally it was like 4 hours where we just coordinated a show, and we put together a show for the just the general public, which is great because it's exposing more people to flatland, and it's encouraging, you know, the neighborhood kids to kind of get into it and try it out. And it's been really rewarding. So I want to do more of it. So I'm glad to be sharing this on the podcast, because if anyone's interested, reach out to me, because I like to go to events and I like to offer that, you know, bring, whether I have bikes that I can bring, if it's in the Pacific Northwest, or I just go and just invite whoever can come with whatever bike they have.
That's so cool. I think it's so great because, again, it goes back to the conversation of the fundamentals and just teaching kids how to play around on their bikes. And again, kids don't have to have a skate park near them. They don't have to be riding distance from a skate park. They can just learn how to ride their bike. And I believe that it's one of the things that it adds to your skill set. So not having gone through one of your camps, or not having done a lot of, not having learned a lot into the flatland realm of things, but knowing some of the fundamentals that I do have, is those things have helped make me a better rider in other areas, in racing, skate parks, mountain biking. I mean, I've had conversations with people that have asked about my mountain biking, and they got into mountain biking. They never rode bikes growing up. They got into mountain biking. They got a full suspension bike because someone told them that that was the way to go. And then
Mm-hmm.
they would ask me and say, how do you ride the way that you do? And I would say, well, I mean, first I would say, go to a hardtail, because
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. Yeah.
all that suspension is correcting for you and it's making you a worse rider. And I said, if you really want to get better, I tell everybody, go buy a $400 BMX bike and go and jump off a curb and find out how bad you are at landing. Because you feel
Yeah.
everything in there. And in the same way is that skill translates to a mountain bike, because you learn how to adjust your bike and adjust the angles for the landing that you're coming up to. And in a similar
Mm-hmm.
way, some of those flatland skills translate over your ability to track stand, your ability to bunny hop 180, your ability to do these other things. They will translate over to the skate park or the track or whatever it may be.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think of like some styles of riders like Matthias, who's, you know, incorporating his flatland into street riding, which is another whole thing. I mean, think about like what Rodney Mullen did. Rodney, when flatland, when freestyle skateboarding, you know, really died off, then he just started doing street, but he was doing incredible street combinations. So like, that's really encouraging I think of a, you know, a young 20-year-old that's really good at, you know, riding skate parks, let's say, and then they dive into flatland, and then they start to incorporate doing G turns and doing stuff out of, you know, even on the decks and the lips, and then dropping back in. That's always been entertaining to me, and I feel like that, you know, that's coming up in many different styles of people, but, you know, I think it's something that we should continue to encourage for sure.
Yeah, that's great. And yeah, I think it just builds so many skills. And again, back to the confidence, it builds confidence, because those
Yeah.
smiles and the desire to be on their bike is incredible.
Yeah.
So Dave, how did you become the rider that you were? So obviously you said you started riding, you were in San Diego. You started riding, but how were you found? How did you become the
Uh,
name that you have now?
yeah, that's an interesting story. So I grew up in Golden Hills, San Diego. So that's just up from downtown. Kind of a shady part of town, I must say. I have three brothers, and two of my brothers, my older brothers, they started getting into partying, and they started to party way too much, and I was like this slippery slope. And it's a story that, like, I'm so grateful that they got out of it, but they both became very addicted to drugs and lost probably 10 years of their life. And I was like right on that slippery slope, but I was riding my bike all the time. I didn't get my license till I was like 17, maybe 17 and a half. I rode my bike everywhere. So as I mentioned, I would go to the beach and I would ride with my friends, and that was my thrill. And yeah, sure, I would occasionally go out and party. It wasn't like I didn't do that at all, but I was focused more on my ability of having fun on my bike and hanging out with those friends. And so I did that a lot, probably for a good 2 or 3 years. I actually rode my bike to school every day, and I used to get PE credit. So it was like an independent class that I took instead of sitting on a bus, because they used to, it was like a charter school. So they used to bus students from all over the city. And instead of sitting on the bus for 45 minutes, I'd ride my bike, and almost every day, because San Diego's weather's so great. And again, it just built, confidence, and just, and I was more of a street rider. I rode like a race bike with no brakes and no pegs, and I just bunny hop, foot pant, just wheelies. I guess that was pretty much, I could do wheelies and bunny hops. And then I learned rock walk was the first trick that I actually learned. And then I kind of started venturing down. So as I did this for a while, I started getting pretty good, and I was used to performing in front of people, because at the beach we'd get a crowd. We'd have a boom box playing Beastie Boys, and just like getting a crowd and showing off and having like a little, almost like a battle film format. And I love that. Like one guy would go out and try to like outdo him, and it was back and forth. And so a friend of mine, Tony Murray and John Peterson, told me about this contest in Huntington Beach, AFA contest. It was 1984. And they said, you should go up and compete. And I'm like, I don't know. I was really like, felt like I wasn't good enough to compete. And they go, no, they have a beginner's class, just ride for fun. So I decided to do it. I remember paying him like $20 for gas, and like just literally just going up there with John, like with hardly any money in my pocket, just to like go and experience this. And then a little side story, I used to do a lot of jumping, and I'd break a lot of parts. Like I wasn't the best jumper. I do a lot of those kind of jumps where you just dive into a canyon and then you just land flat bottom. So you just do like a big old, bio air or whatever, and then land both wheels. So I broke these forks. This was a couple weeks before the contest. So my sponsor at the time was my mom. I mean, that was who I would hit up. I'm like, Mom, I need some forks. I just broke them. And she's like, how much are they? And they were like $30, or I think they were like $40 or something, is what I'm remembering. And anyhow, so she bought me some forks. And then like 2 days before the contest, or the weekend I was going to go down for this contest, I broke the brand new pair of forks. And I went to my mom, and I'm like, Mom, is there any way I can get some money to buy some forks? And she's like, David, I just bought you forks. What do you mean? I go, I know, I was right. I was at this jump and I broke these forks, the new ones, and I want to go to this contest. And so she said, the only way we can do this is we got to have a family meeting, because right now, so she's a single mother, kind of living paycheck to paycheck. And she's like, okay, we're going to sit down with your brothers and we're going to have a meeting. And the meeting went like this. She said, okay, David wants $40 for these forks. If I buy these forks for David, we have to eat whatever's in the cupboards for the next, week or whatever until payday, because I cannot go grocery shopping. I mean, this is what it came down to. And both my brothers said, buy the forks. And they, supported 100%. So we bought the forks, put it on there, went down to the contest, and I entered novice, and I ended up getting first place. I had some original tricks that I had done. I had done this handstand that no one else had done. And I did really well. I mean, I was used to riding. I was really nervous, but I was used to riding in front of crowds. So once I got into my trick, I felt like, okay, this is my zone, and I was in my, in my comfort zone. And then I had a couple people that I talked to. I talked to Robert Peterson, who was with Skyway. I talked to somebody at Free Agent. I can't remember who that was. And then talked to Ron Wilton. Do you know that name at all? So he rode for Haro back in the day, and then he left Haro and went to ride with RL at BMX Action.
Okay.
And he told me, I can't say much about what's going on, but there might be an opening. What was happening was he was leaving Haro. So he mentioned to Bob, hey, you might want to take a look at Dave. So Dave, and I'm just a flatland only. So I was the first Haro rider that was only flatland. Everyone else was like either a skate park rider, ramp rider, or overall rider. So that was something that Bob, I guess, took a little bit of a risk on for me. So he came to a contest down in Lakeside, and we met. And I remember meeting Bob, and it was just awesome. And I obviously looked up to him and was very honored to meet him. And he shook my hand. He said, "Yeah, well, give me your number, and we might be needing some riders for some shows." And I kind of figured that he probably said that to a lot of people, like, he's Bob Haro, and he's a nice guy, and people always ask, like, I don't know, try to get sponsored or whatever. I wasn't trying to push it. I was just like, open to hearing what he had to say, and I was very grateful that he was even considering. But sure enough, 2 weeks to the day, pretty much, he called me up, and I was at the time working minimum wage, and I was going to school at night, and basically just riding whenever I could on the weekends and any spare time I had. And he said, "Well, we have a show in Stockton, California." And I'm like, "All right, I'm down." He's like, "Come up and we'll get you geared up." So he gave me like bike, all the gear, and I was like in heaven. And so that I went from my first contest to like basically full factory ride in literally like 2 months. So yeah, it was just really quick. And so it went from September 1st contest, October 1st show, to signing a contract in November of '84. And it was funny. So I'll tell you, I signed the contract, and it was a very little amount, but it was enough for me to quit my job, making minimum wage, because I figured, well, I'm getting a salary. Like I said, it wasn't very much, but I didn't have a lot. I didn't need a lot to live off of, but I was like, who wouldn't want to ride their bikes for Haro and make a living doing shows? And then I got a photo contingency when I got pictures in the magazines, and then every time I did a show, you got to pay. You got payment per show. And so I quit my job, and I remember going in there, and my boss, I had been working there for a few months now, and they had just promoted me. So I was making $3.35 an hour or something like that. That was like a little more than minimum wage. And I said, "I'm putting my 2 weeks notice." And he said, "Well, what are you going to do?" And I said, "Well, I'm actually going to go do bike shows on my bike." And he's like, "You're going to join the circus?" And I'm like, kind of. Kind of feels like the circus. Looking back now, traveling with Ron and Brian was like the circus. But obviously no regrets. I remember that was easy to make that decision. Dropping out of school was a little bit more challenging because I didn't stay in college, because I just kept getting opportunities to travel. Oh, you want to go to Japan for a month? Like, sure. And then trying to stay in school and keep that going just didn't work out. So eventually I just dropped out and just started riding full time, and no regrets, I must say.
That's super cool, man. What a story. And like you said, so quick, the turnaround on that.
Yeah.
That's wild. Earlier I
Yeah.
made a comment about seeing you in freestyling, but I wanted to clarify. Would I have seen you in freestyling? Or am I thinking of other amazing?
So, I mean, basically, there was freestyle in BMX Plus, BMX Action, and then freestyling was the freestyle. But yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Okay.
I got coverage in most of those. Back in those days, there was a lot of opportunities. I remember John Carr, who was at Dirty Fest, took a picture of me on the beach on a brand new bike and on the sand, and then eventually had me in the water doing this handstand, the Nourie handstand. And he kept saying, well, this might be a cover shot. This might be a cover shot. And I'm like worried about my bike because the water's almost to like to the, hubs, like getting into the hubs, right? And I didn't get a cover shot, but I did get a full color page, which is actually really, really nice. And I had someone redraw that, and now I have a T-shirt with that drawing from 85. Yeah.
Well, that's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll have to look for that photo. Because I don't know that I remember seeing that one, but it sounds
BMX Plus sometime in early 85,
okay.
but I don't remember what month.
Okay. Yeah, I think my dad's collection is like kind of hit or miss. It's not, he doesn't have all the
Everyone,
issues,
yeah.
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 No, that's really cool though. It's fun to hear your story of yeah, of just starting out, and then I love the question of, are you joining the circus?
Right.
That
Yeah,
just
you
makes
joined the
me
circus,
laugh.
and I was young, and I was, I remember kind of being a little bit, not intimidated, but a little bit like, questioning it just right. I didn't know, but in
Yeah.
my heart, I was like, yeah, absolutely. Like, why wouldn't I? And take that risk. It's a little more challenging when you're older and you have a family, obviously, and you have to think about providing for more than yourself. But at that time, it was just me, and I was like, yeah, this is a no-brainer.
Yeah, because I mean, to some extent, as long as you had a tent and a sleeping bag, you were good.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I literally, like I said, I didn't even have a car. Eventually, I got a van that someone gave me, but I rarely drove it, and I rented a room. Like, like my expenses were very minimal, and then, traveling with Ron and Brian, those were the two people I traveled with together for 5-6 years on Haro and with Two Hip, and talk about, life lessons.
At this moment, I'm going to interrupt our episode, our current interview, briefly to give a special shout out and thank you to our sponsors that have backed us financially in this project, in our mission, and give them a huge thank you. So at our gold level, we have Luminex Neon and Marketing Breakthrough. At our silver level, we have Sound Cedar Lumber and Bicycle Thieves. And at our bronze level, we have Pro Start Gates and Justin Shepard, Title Examiner. Thank you so much for your support. Thank you for backing us. If you are looking for help with any project that you're working on, if you're looking for some cool things to do, go ahead and check out the links to their websites in our description and go ahead and visit them, show them some love. We are so appreciative for their support. And if you are interested in getting involved in a local track, helping out, or sponsoring a local track, sponsoring the BMX Breakthrough project as a whole, please reach out at j@bmxbreakthrough.com. You can also go to our website and find out some of the needs of tracks and some of the things that we are working on at bmxbreakthrough.com. Once again, thank you so much for your support. Let's dive back into this conversation.
Another tagline I have is life lessons through bike lessons, because I feel like when I do a camp, it's not just about, okay, how can you improve your BMX skills? It's also about how you can be part of a group, team. How can you speak in front of a microphone? Like all these, have that confidence. How you can face challenges. How can you embrace failure? Because failure is actually your ticket to winning. Because the more that and I tell them, the more you can fail on the tail whip, the quicker you can learn it. If you try to, try it 20 times in a minute, because sometimes they'll do a tail whip and they'll ride around, and we'll do another one. And I go, okay, that's great, but that was a minute, and you only did 2 tail whips. Try to do like 10 in a minute, so that you're going to fail as many times as you can as quickly, because then you're going to advance. And so I feel like the whole life lessons through bike lessons is something that I learned all on tour. So many life lessons through crazy adventures, some scary.
I love that.
Yeah.
That dynamic of do it again quicker. And I remember an episode of Nitro Circus a few, like, I don't know, probably a decade ago, when Travis Pastrana and friends were trying a really low backflip, and I think it's Andy Bell that like breaks his foot or his wrist or something. And Travis goes,
Hmm.
all right, do it again before the pain sets in and you realize that it's broken. Go, go, go. And it's
Oh my
kind of,
gosh.
and it's kind of the same dynamic where it's like, okay,
Yeah.
before you activate that fear sensor in your brain of failing or
Yeah.
getting hurt at this, just go and try it again. Do
Yeah.
it again, do it again, do it. So I like that.
Yeah. And I think it's just that, in life as well, right? Because if you think about anything, I mean, we can be really conditioned not to fail. And like, you got to figure this out. And I would encourage, someone that's younger, that's just getting into what they're going to do for life, to try a bunch of things. And it's okay to fail, because then, oh, that wasn't for me. I'm not very good at that. That's
Absolutely.
not my jam. And so if you can kind of, translate that to your riding and know same thing that you would apply in other aspects of your life.
Yeah, I like that. So you mentioned touring with Two Hip. Did you ride for Two Hip as well?
Well, yeah. So after Haro, so basically this heyday lasted for about 5 years. So I rode 85. I signed in late 84, but we did an 85 tour, 86, 87, 88. And then 89 is when we rode for Two Hip. And so we did a Two Hip tour for Ron. So technically I rode for Two Hip, but I still rode a Haro. I
Okay,
didn't ride a Two Hip at the time.
gotcha.
And we did clinics. Actually, that was the first time that I started doing clinics, probably, apart from the organic, just hanging out, riding with buddies or people that we met, where we did a clinic. And that was all Ron's idea. I mean, I learned so much from Ron. Everything that I implement in today, like my performance teaching, which is about, like, we got to keep a tight show, practice your 3 tricks, make sure you have 3 tricks you can do, 3 tricks that you're pretty good at doing, and 3 tricks that maybe you're working on, and that's your 9 tricks. But let's take turns and go back and forth so that the show is entertaining. So all those things came from Ron, because Ron was so good about how to orchestrate that, and that's one of the reasons why we had a really good show. I mean, it was just that every day we would talk about the show. We'd do the show, and then on the drive to the next town, we'd say, "Oh, that worked really well," or "This didn't work as good," and it was never never felt like work, and it never felt like the 3 of us clicked in such a good way that we were never challenged by egos or animosity between each other. We all just wanted to be working towards the better performance, better show.
That's awesome. That's
Yeah, it
really
was a lot
cool.
of fun. And we're doing more. So we're doing a Back for More tour. I might have mentioned that when I met you at Dirty Fest.
I don't
So
think
we
so.
are in the middle of a tour right now. This is what my jersey is. So this is a Back for More in 24. And we're doing, so we did the first one in Seattle a couple weeks ago. The one I was telling you about, where some riders from Federal Way came up and had some old pictures from that show. And then we're going next week. I fly to Germany. We do Cologne, and then Paris. We have like a little ride out. Then London, the show, and then just outside of Manchester and Darwin, and then New York, and then back home. So we're doing like five more stops.
Wow. Okay.
And it's a 40-year anniversary tour, which is unbelievable to think about. It's 4 decades.
I love that. Man. Yeah, and then just bringing it around full circle, being able to teach kids to invest in the next generation the way that you do, and to teach them the skills, the show layout, how to orchestrate that, how to plan that out, to be able to gain that confidence, perform for their parents, and then the fact that you're still doing that is just really cool.
It's a lot of fun.
So,
And it's
man,
needed. It's needed because, like, Flatland, I mean, like, racing, there's always, when we were at Seattle, like this, it was at SeaTac, so it's the big BMX track there. And it was great because the audience was probably, I would say, 50% racers. And a lot of them were under, 12 probably. So there was a whole group that got exposed to freestyle. And I love that. And I just want to continue that, because if you go to a flatland contest, the riders are all very old. They're getting older. There's not any new blood. There's not very many young riders. So we got to encourage that.
Interesting. Yeah. That's
Like
a
you can't. There's a couple riders. I'm trying to think. This contest I was just at, and there was like 12 pros, and there was probably 2 that were under 30. So yeah.
wow.
And there is a beginners class, and there are some younger riders, but I guess it's partly because in the 80s, BMX was pretty trendy. You know, it was very like bike shops sold a lot of bikes. You know, there were a lot of GT performers and horror masters that went out the door. And now it's not like that. There's not as many bike shops, you know, throughout the U.S.
Yeah.
I mean, other countries, you know, you have to, it's different. Like Japan is crazy. Japan has lots of schools and lots of kids getting into riding. It's like soccer here is what flatland is there in Japan, but they have a whole different discipline. And like they start really young and they're getting really good really quick. But you know, I think that that's part of it. It's not the same kind of trendy, you know, thing to do. And
Absolutely.
a lot of screen time, a lot of, you know, computer video games and whatnot that are distractions.
Yeah. Well, apparently we just need to figure out how to get more kids connected because like I had told you, I believe I had shared this with you, is that my ultimate goal is I just want kids on bikes. I just want kids riding their bikes and racing.
Yeah.
Awesome. Skate parks, awesome. Flatland, awesome.
Yeah.
Mountain bikes, it doesn't matter. I don't care.
Yeah.
I just don't want kids in front of screens if we can have them out on bikes. And
Yeah.
I mean, and there's a myriad of reasons why bikes are so valuable. And I talk about that with so many people again and again, just on repeat. And I sound like a broken record, but anybody who rides bikes understands the value of having kids on them.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
So.
Yeah, I think even just like you said, just riding in the sense of freedom, because I remember that as a kid, and San Diego's a great place to do it because you can do it year round. But just be able to get on a bike and I used to just go, like I said, I lived in Golden Hills, which is just up from downtown. I could roll out my driveway and literally bomb down these hills. It's almost like picture like San Francisco hills, but not quite. But they're like pretty steep, and you could just like launch off of the curb and just bunny hop and just do this like big air and then end up downtown, you know, and like the freedom of that, being able to ride, and I'd ride all the way to the beach. But I also think like, you know, video games and social media, it's here and we have to embrace it and also just find a balance, like anything, because we could be talking about that. You know, I played video games when I was a kid. I just didn't play a lot of them. I played Defender at the local, you know, mini mart or whatever. And I'd pop a couple of quarters in and then I'd play that and then I'd go ride my bike, you know? And I feel like now maybe the scales are tipped the other way. We have to just bring back a little bit more of the, you know, interactive outdoor activities that can be vital for our well-being, for sure.
Yeah. My kids have access to, we have a Nintendo Switch and they'll play Mario Kart, and we get to play it all as a family, but every once in a while we don't limit it. I don't have to limit it at this point because my kids will turn it on. They'll play a race or two, and then I'll hear them by their own volition go, man, do you want to go play make believe, or do you want to go ride bikes? And then they're out the door. And
yeah, that's great.
And it's great. And it's almost like they'll move from playing Mario Kart on the Nintendo to playing make-believe Mario Kart. And it's like the video game is too limiting, which is fascinating. But like I said, I just haven't had to limit it because they just love being outside. They love all the things that they have access to do. And the video games just don't stack up to one of those priorities.
It reminds me of a story that this guy, Brian, we call him Yellow. He's out of Denver, and he also rides for Reclamation, and he teaches as well. He does a lot of private. So what he does, and he's done shows, and he's just an amazing rider. He does everything from flatland to, you know, skate park and, you know, dirt. I mean, he's just an all around amazing rider. And he told me the story that he started working for a company that was a healthcare provider, independent like health company, and he was hired to work with basically adolescents that were just having abundant amount of screen time, and the parents were just couldn't reach them, and it got me like really emotional just to hear his story, because he was able to connect with this one particular rider who was like 15 years old, 14 or 15 years old. His parents, like, he just drinks Mountain Dew, eats junk food all day. He's on the computer, you know, to the wee hours of the night, sleeps into the, middle of the afternoon, and just that's just what he's doing. And it just, he didn't have a taste of it, it felt like. Because Brian said, I started working with him, and every Tuesday they would meet up, and they did this for like a good 6 months, and it was like just transformed this person's life. And I feel like they just got into something, and they did an excessive amount of it, and we all can do that. It's just like finding the balance. But once he was introduced to it, and Brian was kind of the mentor to kind of, he brought him a bike and showed him the spots, and let's go to these skate parks, kind of showed him the ropes. But it wasn't a lot. It wasn't like Brian had to do this whole intense program. It was just, providing that opportunity. And then with 6 months, he said he like grew his hair out. He was all tan. He was all physical, and he's just like, yeah, going grinding. And it was just so like touching to hear that story. And I feel like what I would like to do is just encourage more people that are, my age or maybe a little younger even, to, formulate some kind of program just to get kids on bikes, because then they'll have that balance, and so if they do some social media and video games, but as long as they have the other side, that will also feed them and get them excited, and that same kind of excitement that I felt when I first did my first contest, like what a thrill that was.
Yeah. And back to one of your words that you've gone back to time and time again is confidence. Giving them confidence and giving them something that they can feel good about and excel at. And there are a lot of kids out there, and for me, I was not great at team sports. I wasn't one of the star athletes in the teams that I tried playing on and the sports that I tried playing. But when I was out on the BMX track, I had, I felt like I had more value. I got as much playing time as I wanted. And at the skate park, I could play as much as I wanted. I wasn't limited to when they decided they were far enough ahead to bring me in. And so sometimes it's amazing, because sports can diminish that self-confidence. And so even if it's not, maybe it's subconscious, but having a bike, I don't have to wait on anybody. I don't have to, nobody has to tell me that I'm good in order to validate me. It doesn't matter how good I am. I can just keep riding lap after lap after lap at the skate park or on the sidewalk. It doesn't matter.
Yeah. Yeah, that reminds me of another funny story. So when I used to ride, like I was saying, in streets of San Diego, up and down University Avenue, I had this whole little path, knew where each little curve and jump, and, like weaving through traffic. And my mom was driving down University one afternoon with a friend, and she said to her friend, "Hey, look at that kid. Look at that stunt he just did, and didn't know it was me. And then I did some trick, and I did like a look back or something, and she saw my face. And then I came home that afternoon, and she said, "Oh, so David, so you seem pretty good on that bike of yours." I'm like, yeah, like I just rode, like that's just what I did. It wasn't something that I was trying to become a professional or trying to like practice to become. Especially then, I was just a kid on a bike riding the streets. And so she said, "No, but I saw you doing a trick. You did like a spinaroo and 360," and I just remember hearing that. I'm like, I guess it just kind of made me start to think like, oh yeah, I guess that is somewhat of a skill set. It is something that, and then it was not like we didn't have X Games. We didn't have like the BMX in the Olympics, anything close to that. But I guess my point being is that whatever it is that, you're into, whether it's, breakdancing or, playing guitar or even video games, it's like if you can just kind of do it for the sake of doing it and having fun with it, and who knows what doors would open for you.
Absolutely. And just those smiles that we have when we nail something and, land that trick that you've been trying for months on end or weeks on end or even years on end
Yeah.
sometimes is, oh, I finally did it. And it's fun if there's a camera or if somebody saw it, but even if there's not, you still have that confidence that I finally got it.
Yeah, exactly.
So
Yeah, for sure.
that's cool. Dave, I appreciate your time. Uh I'm so thankful to have this conversation and be able to share what you're doing because I think that it is so valuable, and I think the idea of getting more kids on their bikes, that's what I want. And you're in a different discipline than I've come from, and I think it's so cool to be able to have these conversations because ultimately it just all comes back to the love of BMX and the love of the sport and
Mm.
the love of the people involved. So
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. And I always like talking about it and sharing it because it's just something that has been such a big part of my world. And I can't imagine. I just saying now that I'm going to be the rider from the 80s riding in his 80s. So like I'm going to be 59 this year. So I can't picture not riding in 20 years. Like, I don't know what I'll be doing, but why not?
absolutely. Yeah. And you've got something to prove by doing it, and then at the same time you've got nothing to prove at that point, right?
Yeah, exactly. Right. Just to prove it for myself and just to say, like, what can I do? I could probably still do a slider and probably a handstand. Like, who knows? But it's a little bit of motivation just to be, when I was younger, I didn't really have as much attention on what I eat and my health and like I didn't do yoga every day. Like now I like take care of my body because it's important. And I know like, the more that you put into it, the more you can get out of it. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I appreciate your time, Dave. I appreciate getting to talk to you. And yeah, again, so thankful. How do people find out about, obviously we're coming to the end of the season. I would assume
Yeah.
for some of your camps and things, but looking into 2025, people putting on events, people want to reach out to you.
Yeah.
How is it that we get a hold of you?
Yeah, it's super easy. I mean, basically, I'm really fortunate because on any social media platform, it's just Dave Nourie. So whether it's TikTok, Facebook, YouTube, I'm building my YouTube channel, and it's just the website, which is davenourie.com. And there's a link there that would just basically be Nourie's Bike Academy, and then you would just fill out a quick little thing like, are you interested in, working independently? I'm also talking about, like I mentioned earlier, forming a Facebook group because I feel like that could be a good way to branch out in a format that I can reach more people. I can only do so much here in my town. And then I'm also doing a weekend at Nourie, which is like a 3-day. This is for a rider. Usually they're in their like 40s or 40 plus, and they just kind of getting back into the sport. But that would just be a weekend here. We just hang out and ride and go to all the different spots. So I'm looking at doing that in October. So yeah, just reach out to me on any of those platforms. I'm always open to, different events that I can show up and perform. I'm not really the performing rider anymore. It's hard for me to do a one person show, but I do love coming and doing like a little mini show, and then like let's do a little clinic and or camp. Those are
That's
that's
awesome.
really my place now.
Well, then, yeah, in the case that somebody wants to put on an event and get more people riding and pull people out onto their bikes and not just watching, sounds perfect.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's not just about, it's like the interaction. That's like what I talked about in Mexico. It was great to have that opportunity. And we had people that I don't know what their lifestyle was like, but boy, they had a great time on their little, bike that they rode that was barely a BMX bike, but they did a show and it was great. So I like, all kinds of different opportunities like that, however that comes up.
Love it. Right on. Well, again, thank you, Dave. Thanks for your time. I appreciate everything that you've shared, and I appreciate your continued investment into the sport and into kids and into people. So thank you.
Sounds good. Thank you, Jay. And hopefully our paths will cross again sometime
Absolutely.
soon.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it. Cool.
Okay.
Well, take
Have
care,
a good
Dave.
night.
Thank you.
All right. Yeah, you too. Okay, bye.
Thank you for joining us in today's episode. It is because of people like you and our sponsors who make this whole thing possible, because they have a desire to see the sport grow. If you would like to get involved in the mission of BMX Breakthrough, you can start by going to your local track, find a way to volunteer, help out, and serve there. Or you can go to our website, bmxbreakthrough.com, in order to donate, find out about sponsorship, or learn more.